Hello everybody, today we're doing my first ever sequels what if, and it's something I've wanted to do for a while. It's kind of just what if Anakin, visited Luke before he went to Ben in The Last Jedi like we saw in the flashbacks. So it's really something I've wanted to try, but something I was nervous to try because I don't know how the reception is going to be, so I wanted to take my stab at this. Please let me know in the comments, do you want to see more sequel stuff? Would you like, I'm obviously going to go back to prequels. I've got a few Anakin videos lined up for next week. Wasn't sure how I'd do with the sequel video, but I really enjoy this. It's one of my better ones, I hope. Alright, let's get right into it. Luke Skywalker sat meditating in his Jedi hut as his students slept. He was having a harder time sleeping lately. There was a dark cloud that surrounded his Jedi Order, like a single seed of darkness that was spreading, threatening to destroy everything that Luke had worked for, threatening to kill everyone. And today Luke traced this darkness to its core, and as he did, his world shattered. Ben Solo. He was already heavily influenced by the dark side, by Snoke, and Luke could see the faint visions, a red crossguard saber, death, destruction across the galaxy, all caused by Ben, the boy he trained. Luke quickly stood up right now and began walking to Ben's hut. He would stop this darkness. He didn't yet know how, but it could not continue any longer, and Luke entered the hut and looked down at Ben, then reached out into the Force. The darkness was even stronger in here, and without even realizing it, Luke grabbed his saber. He went for the ignition button, but a new voice rang out. A voice that Luke hadn't heard in a long time. His father. Luke snapped out of it and quickly put the lightsaber away as Anakin asked Luke to come outside. Luke walked out of the hut to see his father, dressed in light Jedi robes, covered by a large, darker one, and he was the translucent blue hue that all of these Force spirits were surrounded by. Luke walked up to Anakin, a tear in his eye, as he told Anakin that he failed. He failed Ben, Leia, Han, but Anakin simply asked Luke to walk with him right now. Anakin asked Luke what he felt within Ben, and Luke said he felt darkness, perhaps too much darkness to ever overcome. But Anakin just began to chuckle, asking Luke if he was too dark to ever come back on the Death Star. Back then, when Luke brought Anakin out of Vader, he was so much more hopeful, younger, naive to the galaxy, to the Jedi and Sith, to everything really. He was simply a boy with all the hope in the galaxy, with a few years of training, and now Anakin told him to find a new hope inside of Ben. Anakin told Luke that Ben is not gone, he just needs Luke Skywalker to save him, like he saved Anakin Skywalker. Anakin faded away now, and Luke was faced with shame for what he nearly did to Ben. He'd felt the darkness in Ben, and it scared him because he felt that darkness not only in Vader, but in himself. Luke would be a fool to think he was free of the dark side. Fighting Vader on the Death Star, he nearly lost himself. And now, here, he almost did it again. Luke took a deep breath and walked back into Ben's hut. He woke the boy and asked him to walk with him. Together, they walked for a while to a small area, where Luke then began climbing a tree and asked Ben to come with him. Ben followed up the tree, and the two sat on a small platform above the trees that Luke had built here. Together, they looked out over the landscape, and Luke told Ben that this is where he took his first student so long ago. A small, green child called Grogu, back when things were much different. Now, Luke had a small Jedi Order of around 13 students. Some were ready to take on more responsibility, and so Luke told Ben here and now that he wanted to take Ben on as his personal Padawan. Sure, Luke had trained Ben and the rest, but Luke wanted to go back now to true master and apprentice relationships, now that some Jedi were old enough to teach. And here and now, he took Ben as his true Padawan, and Ben was extremely grateful for this. They sat together for a bit longer, and then Luke began talking about the dark side. Luke was vulnerable with Ben, saying that he even could feel the dark side. Luke said he could feel the anger, the strength, the power of the dark side. And then, looking Ben in the eyes, he said it takes true power to recognize what the dark side actually is. It's a weakness, a poison, a shortcut that promises power, but only leads to endless suffering. And Luke told Ben the full story of Anakin Skywalker, how he had a wife, friends, a Jedi Order, but the promise of power caused him to lose everything. Until Luke brought him back. And through the light side, Anakin lives on. Through the darkness, Anakin was gone, and Vader only knew pain, suffering, sadness. Hearing all of this, Ben finally began to vent what was going on with him, how Snoke had been whispering to him, and how he's even visited Snoke. Ben let it all out, saying he was nearly all the way to the dark side, but hearing this true story of Anakin, hearing Luke explain that he even felt the darkness, Ben said that it was time he let go and truly become the Padawan of Luke, make his parents proud. The two of them were never more connected, and they descended down to the ground. Ben took one final look at the landscape in front of him, and he felt a faint connection. He saw the faint blue outline of a man that he somehow knew to be Anakin, and Anakin smiled, nodded, then faded away, and Ben embraced the light side. Luke would go on to establish more formal master and apprentice relationships in his order, promoting half of the Jedi to the role of master, and he was now Grand Master. And he would go on to train Ben Solo exclusively, while being available for any of the other Jedi. For a few months, Ben became strong in the Force. He selfishly wanted power, and training under Luke gave him that power. And finally, after this few months, the two of them were closer than ever. Now they had to go on a mission together, find and kill Snoke, before he could bring the First Order to life across the galaxy. Luke instructed Ben as he once again touched into the dark side, but this time it was much more controlled than ever, and Ben did this until he was truly connected with Snoke. Ben asked Snoke through the Force where he was, and Snoke said he was enacting final preparations to truly unleash the First Order upon the galaxy. The Imperial remnant was growing, but Luke and Ben knew that if they killed Snoke, the head of the snake, then the First Order would be in disarray long enough to be destroyed. Finally, Snoke revealed he was on his base in the Amaxine space station and was waiting for Ben's arrival so they could do this together. Ben broke off the connection, and Luke was proud of him for feeling the dark side while staying in the light. One lesson Luke was taking from the fall of the Jedi was that the darkness cannot be ignored. It is part of the Force. It will always remain. So the Jedi must acknowledge it, be strong enough to defeat it. And so Luke informed the rest of the Jedi where him and Ben were going. He could not take all of the Jedi. It was too risky. So he and Ben traveled alone to the space station. As they flew through hyperspace, Ben and Luke talked about everything going on in the galaxy. As things stood right now, the Jedi Order was small but building, around 20 members or so at this point. The New Republic was rebuilt, but they had no military. Chancellor Mon Mothma had gotten rid of it after the Empire was thought to be wiped out. Leia was cast out of the New Republic after everyone learned that Vader was her father, and now she was the leader of the Resistance, a small but strong military group that knew there were still dangers in this galaxy. And of course, Han Solo, father of Ben, was still hanging around the Resistance. Him and Leia went through a rocky stretch, but when Luke informed them that he was personally training Ben on a much more exclusive level, Han and Leia seemed to be stronger together once again. With Chewbacca, of course, and Luke had even learned that Han begrudgingly took a new Resistance pilot under his wing, an expert X-Wing pilot. Luke and Ben chuckled at the idea of Han training someone to fly. That poor pilot. Eventually, the two Jedi emerged above the space station, and Ben gave his clearance signal. They flew through the space station together, which surrounded a dying star, and eventually landed in a clearing among many exotic plants. Ben got out first, and walked as if nothing was wrong until Snoke emerged in front of him. Snoke, wearing his golden robes, had an extremely scarred, broken face as he stood tall above Ben, a reminder of his previous encounter with Luke Skywalker. And Snoke began speaking to Ben, when he was suddenly surprised by the emergence of someone else. Luke Skywalker was here. Snoke was betrayed. Snoke turned around, and then began laughing as at least 100 First Order stormtroopers flew down from the station on jetpacks to surround the Jedi. Snoke began screaming out at the Jedi that he was no fool. He felt this shift in Solo long ago, and he was ready for it. Snoke stared at the two Jedi, saying that they would die here, and he would decimate the pathetic Jedi Order. Luke and Ben were both worried now. They both could feel the darkness. They would have to use their full power to even have a slight chance of getting out of this. And Snoke yelled at the troopers to fire, but not a moment later, all 100 of the troopers were blown away by new incoming ships. Snoke looked to the sky and moved before he was shot down as well. Luke and Ben stood in the middle of tons of firepower, confused but happy that they were saved. Ben felt his communicator beeping, so he answered to his father, Han Solo, saying, "You're all clear, kid. Now go take down Snoke. We'll handle the space station." The smoke cleared, allowing Ben and Luke to see the Millennium Falcon next to an X-Wing, leading a full squad of Resistance fighters. Once again, Han arrived just in time. The two Jedi had no idea how the Resistance found them, but Luke thought perhaps Leia used the Force, or someone in his Jedi Order informed the Resistance. Either way, he was grateful and he saluted up to Han as he and Ben sprinted after Snoke. The two of them jumped through rough terrain, fighting through the plants as they came to a clearing. Snoke was seated on a rock, watching the fight above as the Resistance surprise attack was overtaking the First Order. Snoke looked at them and said that this ends here and now. Ben and Luke ignited their lightsabers, master and apprentice, ready to take down this dark side leader. And a battle began on the ground, matching the intensity of the fight in the air. Snoke, a master of the dark side, moved with surprising speed for his size. He began to hurl rocks and debris at Luke and Ben, as they skillfully deflected the projectiles with their sabers. Luke's green saber clashed against the invisible wall of Snoke's force energy, creating sparks illuminating the night, and Ben Solo attacked with a fierce determination, trying to prove himself. Amidst the chaos, the exotic plants of the star seemed to come to life, their long vines lashing out at the combatants. Snoke was using the Force to influence the plant life. Luke and Ben parried the attacks, their movements becoming one with the Force. The air was thick with tension, as the battle shifted, swirled around the rough terrain. And Snoke sensed an opportunity, unleashing a powerful blast of Force lightning, sending Ben tumbling backwards. He levitated rocks and debris over his head, forming them into a deadly storm that quickly buried Ben Solo underneath it. Luke jumped back into the fight, keeping some of the debris off of Ben, then pushing back into battle. The fight intensified, but Luke was struggling to get to Snoke. He took a step back, put away his lightsaber, and it became a fight only through the Force. The two battled for a while, challenging each other in the Force, and in a moment of sheer determination, Luke summoned the strength within himself, unleashing a torrent of Force energy. The wave enveloped Snoke, overwhelming him, throwing him off balance as he crashed into a rock. Seizing the opportunity, Luke ignited his saber again, delivering a powerful strike, his lightsaber slicing through Snoke's defenses, striking him down. As Snoke fell, dead, the star seemed to sigh in relief. Luke ran to Ben and removed the debris to find Ben stabbed in the stomach by a sharp rock. Ben looked Luke in the eye and said he was glad to have stayed in the light, and he slumped forward. Luke panicked, quickly calling Han on the Falcon, and used Force Heal to give Ben enough of his life force to keep him alive. Luke would not lose his Padawan like this, and the Falcon landed, ready to help save Ben. Days later, Ben Solo opened his eyes. He was alive, and laying down in a medical bed. He had a bandage around his waist, and Bacta all around him. He was tired, but he quickly recognized the symbols around him. He was in a New Republic facility, and soon enough, the door opened as Ben saw Luke, Leia, and Han Solo enter the room. His mother, father, and master. The three of them told Ben he was out for a few days, and a lot had happened in these days. The space station of the First Order was overtaken and destroyed, and from there, Leia led a group of Resistance leaders to Hosnian Prime, the home of the New Republic. The New Republic was kind of in chaos at the time, split between military or no military, but they all came together now as Leia brought evidence of the First Order. The main base was destroyed, but the group was still a threat around the galaxy. Hearing this truth, the New Republic saw Chancellor Lenevere Villasham step down, replaced by a Togruta woman named Tano Korin. She was named after the legendary Ahsoka Tano, and was a rising politician that now supported rebuilding the New Republic military. And Leia Organa was invited back into the New Republic as one of the leaders of this new military. And so for a few years, the New Republic would rebuild and become a strong government once again. the military would go strong, and the First Order remnants would be wiped out completely, as Poe Dameron became the greatest pilot in the New Republic, eventually even overtaking his mentor Han. Han would never admit it, though he was beyond proud of Poe. Luke had grown the Order to around 50 members, and the Order was once again part of the Republic, though they were on separate planets, to keep enough distance between the two of them so Luke could pick and choose when the Jedi Order would aid the Republic. Things were great, and Ben had become extremely strong in the Force. But across the galaxy, darkness continued to rise. Darth Sidious was always waiting, and it was nearly time for him to retake the galaxy, ambushing it with his Sith Eternal fleet. The day Snoke died and Ben cemented himself as a Jedi was certainly a setback, but it opened up new opportunities for the Sith. Sometime after Ben killed Snoke, Sidious tried to whisper dark thoughts to Ben, as he had so many times before, but the connection only got fainter and fainter until it all but disappeared. But as the connection with Ben disappeared, a new one emerged. One that felt so eerily similar to Ben, but Sidious could not figure out how they were related at all. This new connection he established was with a girl, one that Sidious felt was so powerful in the Force, and she was stranded, alone, vulnerable on a sand planet. Sidious had a deep connection to her, and it took Ben giving up the darkness for Sidious to find this girl, who would become his new apprentice. And Sidious now knew it was the daughter of his clone, Rey Palpatine. Once Sidious was sure that Rey was powerful enough, he sent out the Knights of Ren to capture her, and they did it perfectly, finding Rey, bringing her to Exegol, where Sidious kept her locked up, depriving her of anything that was good, forcing her to find her powers, forcing her to embrace the dark side, without ever truly knowing what she was. After a few months, Rey carried an aura of darkness around her, and Sidious began truly training her in the dark side of the Force. The Sith Lord was weak and broken, but even while connected to machines keeping him alive, he was able to teach Rey, and quickly, Rey became powerful. She was the granddaughter of Sidious, after all. And when she was ready, Sidious sent her on a mission. His spies had informed him that Luke and Ben were away from the Jedi Temple, on a retreat with a few other masters. Luke thought he had nothing to fear, but he was terribly wrong. The temple was vulnerable, and so Rey, now called Kira Ren, led her Knights of Ren to the temple. It was a terrible night for the Jedi Order. Rey and the Knights landed in an open clearing, posing as Jedi, and they swiftly ambushed the Order. They killed around 20 of the Jedi, while capturing 10 of them, and Rey used the Force to burn the temple to the ground, as she and the Knights boarded their ship. 2 of the Knights had fallen in battle, but the mission was a success as Rey looked down at the burning temple, then looked inside to the 10 unconscious Jedi in the ship. They would be perfect for her master's plan. Soon he would be back to full power. And while on this retreat to one of the first Jedi temples on Ahch-To, Luke Skywalker fell to his knees, grabbing his head. Something had gone terribly wrong. In the Force, he heard screaming, pain, lightsaber fights, and at the end of it all, he heard the all-too-familiar sound of laughter. The laughter of Darth Sidious. Eventually, Luke broke out of this vision, and the Jedi were surrounding him, asking what had gone wrong. Luke said they must return to the temple immediately. Something has gone so wrong. They have lost everything. And on Exegol, the 10 captured Jedi were lined up in front of Darth Sidious. They were woken up and tried to escape, but Sidious held them in place. He reached deep into the Force, feeling the darkness, and poured this darkness into the 10 Jedi in front of him. He began to steal their life force, and Rey watched as the 10 Jedi were screaming in agony, feeling their lives being ripped away. And for the first time, Rey felt like perhaps the darkness was not what she wanted. This was almost too much. She tried to push this feeling away, but suddenly she was no longer on Exegol. The light allowed her some sort of vision or connection. She was looking around at trees, grass, and she realized this was the planet that she was just on, with the Jedi Temple. She turned to see that the Jedi had returned, and the leader of the Jedi was on his knees, looking at this burned temple. But a younger Jedi turned to see her, and Rey felt an immense connection to this long-haired boy, like she was looking at her other half. And on Ossus, Ben Solo connected with this girl, She carried the aura of darkness, but at the center of it was a spark of light, just waiting to be ignited. Ben could see a blue planet behind her, and behind this girl, he saw the 10 Jedi being killed by Darth Sidious. Ben broke off this connection, and he fell to the ground by Luke, telling him everything. And on Exegol, Rey watched as Darth Sidious took all of the life force from the 10 Jedi, and he was at full power. She decided to not tell her master about her encounter with the Jedi just now. She was now afraid of him, seeing that perhaps the dark side was not her path. Her master seemed ready to just discard of her. There was a spark of light inside of her that she just could not extinguish. And on Ossus, Luke listened as Ben carefully described what he saw. This all troubled Luke as he began to put the pieces together. His temple was raided, and 30 Jedi were either captured or killed. And now Ben, somehow, connected with a Sith, and he saw these 10 Jedi being killed by none other than Darth Sidious. None of this made all that much sense, but Luke could not ignore it. And the planet that Ben described was one Luke thought to just be a Sith legend, Exegol, a planet that, according to the legend, could only be reached with a Sith wayfinder. Ben asked Luke how they would find this wayfinder, and Luke hated the answer. Mustafar, perhaps the remains of Vader's castle. If a Sith wayfinder would be anywhere, it would be where Vader last resided, a planet of darkness, but one they must travel to, or risk destruction for the New Republic and the Jedi. So Luke, Ben, and 10 other Jedi traveled to Mustafar, while Darth Sidious prepared his fleet on Exegol. His full power had returned, and he would lead his fleet to the New Republic, destroying it swiftly when the fleet was ready. And on Mustafar, the Jedi sifted through the remains of Vader's castle. This place carried so much darkness, so much hatred, and Luke thought he could even hear the screams of anger from Anakin, from Vader, through the Force. It was all so eerie, but after a long while, there was no sign of the Wayfinder anywhere. But suddenly, a group of nomads emerged and began to attack the Jedi. The leader emerged, and on his belt, Luke could see the Wayfinder. It was clear they were protecting this artifact, knowing it could be used to find the Sith. Unfortunately for the Mustafar people, they were not at all prepared to face the Jedi Order. Luke and Ben led the charge into battle, and after a bit, Luke struck down the leader, grabbing the Wayfinder for himself, and realizing it was nearly time to face Sidious again. Luke, Ben, and the rest of the Jedi took the Wayfinder to the New Republic, and began campaigning for a new fight. Luke described what Ben saw, and how the Emperor was still alive, and he had some sort of plan. Luke and Leia worked together to gather the rebuilt New Republic fleet, and once preparations were made, the fleet took off into hyperspace, using the Wayfinder to guide them to Exegol. And on Exegol, Darth Sidious looked at Rey, his apprentice, leader of the Knights of Ren, and told her to prepare for a fight. Somehow, he sensed that the New Republic and the Jedi were coming to them. Somehow, they found out that he was alive. Sidious was trying to find a flaw in Rey in the Force, wondering if she'd betrayed him, but he found nothing. How could she, after all? She never left the planet. And Sidious gave the order for the fleet to emerge, prepare for the fight. The Sith Eternal would be ready for the Jedi and this New Republic. Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo sat in their Jedi Starfighter, looking on as the New Republic fleet was ready to emerge from hyperspace. Among the many members fighting with them, Leia Organa Solo, Han Solo, Chewbacca, Lando Calrissian, Poe Dameron, Finn, Hera Syndulla, Wedge Antilles, so many others, new and old, ready for a final fight. And finally they emerged from hyperspace to find the Sith Eternal fleet waiting for them. The space battle began swiftly, reminding Luke of the battle above Endor, but this was even larger, as he and Ben flew down to the structure far below them, where he knew Sidious was waiting. Darth Sidious sent Rey and the Knights out to meet the Jedi, who he could feel were on their way, and Sidious was back to his full power, as he stood ready for this final encounter. Outside the structure, Luke and Ben soon ran into Rey and the Knights. Ben looked to Luke and told him to go find Sidious. He will deal with these. Luke nodded his head and told Ben that the Force is with him, then took off to find Sidious. Ben looked to Rey and the Knights, remembered her from their connection, then shrugged as he jumped into battle. Amidst the clash of lightsabers and the hum of the Force, the blue battleground was illuminated by the fighting sabers. On one side, Ben Solo, with a determined glint in his eyes, faced off against Rey and her loyal Knights of Ren. The Knights, though skilled, were no match for Solo's fierce mastery of the light side. With swift, calculated movements, Solo disarmed and defeated each Knight one by one, leaving them strewn across the battlefield. As the last Knight fell, Rey jumped into battle, her eyes reflecting a mix of determination but also conflict, and the air crackled with tension as Ben and Rey circled each other, their lightsabers clashing, sending sparks flying. Solo's blue blade met Rey's red one, each strike echoing their inner struggle between the light and dark sides of the Force. The clash of their sabers reverberated through the air, echoing into the next area. And in this other area, the legendary Jedi Master Luke Skywalker confronted Darth Sidious, the embodiment of the dark side. Sidious laughed as Luke entered, saying that he could never be defeated. And Luke looked upon the old, grotesque face for the first time since the Death Star. Back then, he'd brought his father back from the dark side, and today he would officially destroy the Sith. It was a battle of legends waiting to happen, and Luke had no words for the evil Emperor, igniting his lightsaber for this fight. Sidious did not rely on a lightsaber in this battle. Instead, he channeled the dark side of the Force, hurling bolts of Sith lightning at Skywalker. Luke deflected the deadly energy with his own Force powers, creating a counter within the light side, pushing through the lightning bolts. The ground beneath them trembled with intensity of their duel. Luke was drawing upon the teachings of the Jedi, countering Sidious's attacks with every movement that he could, redirecting the Sith lightning into the sky. The air crackled with the power of the Force as the two legendary titans of the Force clashed with each other, and above them, ships fought in a fight reminiscent of the huge attack on Coruscant at the end of the Clone Wars. Everyone knew this was a fight for the fate of the galaxy. Han, Hera, and Poe expertly flew through the air, leading the charge, as the New Republic began to gain an edge. And below them, Ben and Rey engaged in a lightsaber lock. Their eyes locked as well, and a moment later, they connected again. Rey was sent into a vision of Ben's life, seeing what the light side could do to someone, how the light could create true happiness, and even bring the power that the dark side could only promise. Rey had only ever known the dark, so feeling the light was so strange to her, and Ben was thrown through a vision of darkness, connecting with Rey, seeing her life since getting to Exegol, seeing what she had become. The connection broke, and they both fell backwards. Slowly, Ben got up and offered his hand. He told Rey that he could save her, that he too was once with the dark side, but he was saved, and everything is much better now. Ben said he felt a connection to Rey, one that he's never felt with anyone else, and he put away his lightsaber as he grabbed Rey's hand. Rey hesitated, but then grabbed Ben's hand, saying that she too felt this connection, and she asked Ben to help her. Ben said he could do it, but they must defeat her master. And inside, Luke continued to battle Sidious, his deflected strike after strike of lightning, and finally got close enough for a killing swing, but Sidious blasted the ground with lightning, sending Luke flying backwards. The Jedi Grandmaster got up, dazed, and he put his lightsaber up to block an onslaught of more lightning, but he was too late. This time it struck him right in the chest, and it was more powerful than ever. He was enveloped by it. It was the Death Star all over again. He felt himself burning, and right as he thought he was about to die, the lightning stopped hitting him. Instead, two people stood in front of Luke, blocking it. Luke felt into the Force, and he could feel this deep connection between these two. Ben and Rey were a dyad in the Force, and here they stood, protecting Luke, fighting against the Sith. Luke smiled, and he knew Ben was ready to take over, and so he let go. Darth Sidious was completely caught off guard by the emergence of these two, working against him. They blocked the lightning at the same time, deflecting it back at the Dark Lord. Sidious felt their connection as well, the connection of the dyad, and it was all over for him. The lightning was burning him, and he died, with the last thing he saw was the faint outline of Anakin Skywalker, standing next to Yoda, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Luke? Yes, it was him. Luke Skywalker, or the spirit outline of him, now stood next to the Jedi as Sidious died for good. Ben and Rey fell to their knees, exhausted but victorious. Above them, with the Sith dead, the fleet began to falter, and the New Republic emerged victorious as the Sith Eternal Fleet crumbled away. And Ben stood up, running over to find Luke. But Luke was gone. Only his robes remained. Ben was crying out, saying he failed, but then Luke's voice came from behind him. He smiled and said, "You did good, Ben, but it's time for you to take my place alongside her." Luke smiled once again as Ben and Rey looked at each other and then said, "See you around, kid," and he faded away into the Force. A bit later, Leia, Han, Lando, R2-D2, C-3PO, Wedge, Ben, and Rey stood above Luke's robes, the legendary Luke Skywalker. And from here, peace would be assured to the galaxy. The New Republic would continue on, although without Han and Leia. They retired together, moving to live out their days on Naboo, while keeping in touch with everyone. Chewbacca was a common visitor, though he loved the New Republic. Poe Dameron became a military commander alongside Finn, and Lando went off to explore the galaxy. The Jedi Order was rebuilt, with Ben Solo leading it, with Rey by his side. And after a few years, the two of them even married each other, and Rey abandoned the Palpatine name to become Rey Solo. And folks, that's the end of our first sequel video. I enjoyed writing it. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. I thought it was fun. Really longer than any of my other ones. So, hope you enjoyed. Appreciate you. And I'll see you in the next video.